Big Brother, mainstream media, government cover-ups. You want answers? Well, so does he. Live from Austin, Texas, broadcasting worldwide, it's Alex Jones.
We are joined by Afred Adask, who we had on, 6 months ago or so, when 60 Minutes had a special about himself and others, just demonizing him like he's incredibly evil. And then all he does is talk about the Constitution, Bill of Rights, common sense. And, of course, we discussed then the fact that they're rebranding terrorism off of Al-Qaeda over to domestic groups that want to get our republic back. And his website is adask.wordpress.com. Here's his bio. I'm Afred Adask, and the author of virtually all of the text published on this website. And then it just goes into all the things that he's done over the years fighting the globalists. So we're going to be talking to him for the rest of the hour and taking your calls. And then I've got news items. I want to get his take on things happening in the news and what he thinks of the globalists, because they know that their vaccines are killing people. They openly now admit that the government's growing the opium in Afghanistan and shipping it into the U.S. and having the troops grow it. It came out in federal court in Chicago. This is, again, is in the El Paso Times, Narcosphere News. It's up on Infowars.com. Federal filing where when they bust these narco-terrorists now, they're bringing into court the fact that they work for the CIA, bringing narcotics in. And the federal government's saying, yes, national security, it's true, but still we want them to go to jail. That's kind of like Hal Turner, who attacked me for like a decade, saying I was covering up for Israel when we're critical of Israel. And he used to work with Sean Hannity, and he would say, kill this federal judge, get that federal judge, this judge needs to die, and never get in trouble. And I said, that guy's a Fed. And I said, you better watch it, buddy. They'll set you up. Well, people hacked his email and got his emails from the FBI where they were handling him. And so he was no longer useful, so they put him in jail. And what he's facing the trial right now for stuff he was ordered to do on record. And the FBI came in and said, Mr. Turner is our highest level national security operative. Not an agent, but he does work in our employ. And but go ahead and put him in prison. See, that's a message all you guys need to get through your head. The Sinaloa drug cartel head is in the news. Here it is right here in my little hand. It's up on Infowars.com with a link to the federal filing. You'll be on the federal court's website. And they're like, yeah, we brought in tens of tons of cocaine. Yeah, we're shipping guns into Mexico, Honduras. We're shipping them into Illinois, Texas, Florida, California. That's now all mainstream news. And nobody gets in trouble except their own minions. So we're talking about a synthesis of evil that runs our society. You see, you could have an emperor, philosopher, king who wanted to build public works, wanted to educate people, and wanted to build a civilization. And we've seen maybe 20 cases of that or less in 6,000 years of recorded history. And you'll see civilizations leap forward under that because they actually take the largesse and actually build things for populations. But what happens is, and have a vision, and try to bring science to the public. The problem is they always die. And maybe their son isn't as bad, but the grandson's a psychopath. And then he has an even crazier son. And pretty soon it's Roman emperors marrying their horse. Caligula would march the horse in. It would go to the bathroom. He'd have the high priest read it like tea leaves. I'm not joking. This is mainline history. They normally gut a bull and read the guts or spill the blood all over them and how the splatters were. They would then portend. But he made them worship the horse's dung, basically, just as an act of power, an act of insanity, or burn part of the city for fun like Nero and get so decadent they commit suicide. This is what happens. The worst of the worst get in control, and you get a Stalin, a Hitler, a Mao, a Pol Pot that Zbigniew Brzezinski bragged he supported, who killed 30% plus of the people of Cambodia. And then Brzezinski writes books bragging. They brag whenever Brzezinski walks into a globalist meeting. They're like, oh, your graciousness. They get off on how many deaths they've committed. So that's my view on their philosophy. There really isn't a philosophy at all. It's just trampling and being trampled. Always pressing on the nerve of power. We're the priest of power, Winston. In fact, later I want to read it. We'll hold Adask into the next hour to give him the full time here because I'm on a roll. But will you print me from 1984? You can just type in Winston, picture a boot stomping on a human face forever. It's about 10 paragraphs above that and about 5 below that. I want to read that later because that describes the full globalist system. It's a world built by sadists and psychopaths to carry out always greater and greater dumbing down and ugliness because it's beautiful to them. Liberty and independence is anathema. It's like nails on a chalkboard to these people. Afred Adask, good to have you here with us. Give us your view on the philosophy of the parasites and what they're building and your fight against them.
Well, I can tell you that it's good to be here. First off, Alex, I appreciate you having me on. But I was one of 7 defendants that were sued back in, the case started in 2001. I wasn't added until 2006. I was the last of 7 defendants sued for the manufacture and distribution of a controlled substance, and the controlled substance was colloidal silver. All right, it wasn't heroin or cocaine or something like that or methamphetamine.
That I can buy at H-E-B and Whole Foods here in Austin right now.
That's exactly right. And I volunteered to be fiduciary for a trust. The trust was one of the defendants in the case. They made me a defendant. We were threatened with fines. Each defendant, $25,000 per day. That's $9 million per year. I read the relevant case, and I guarantee being sued for $9 million a year focuses your attention. And I read the relevant law. And what we discovered, I read the definition of drugs in both the state and federal health code. And this goes to your notion about what their philosophy is. The Texas Attorney General wrote in part in his case, he said, the key to this case lies in determining at law, not as a matter of fact, whether the defendant's colloidal products met the definition of drug when mislabeled. And then he quotes from the Texas Health and Safety Code, section 431.002, subparagraph 14, which defines the word drug. And it says, drug means article recognized in the United States Pharmacopoeia National Formulary, any supplement to it, articles designed or intended for the use in the diagnosis, cure, mitigation, treatment, or prevention of disease in man or other animals. They're not saying man or animals. They're saying man or other animals, which means they deem man to be an animal.
And what you discovered is something we similarly discovered decades ago, and for all of us, we discover this in different ways. In hundreds of globalist documents, and documents going back thousands of years, all governments that oppress, Hitler did it, the Babylonians did it, the Israelites did it, they would always list the slaves as non-human. We listed blacks as non-human. It's a legalese. They see themselves as exalted and awake, and that's what they mean in the movie They Live. When you have the glasses, they say, I've got one that can see. When you actually converse with a globalist in person, they shake in fear because and they'll say, oh, you're a human. And that's what Frank Herbert wrote about in Dune, is that the elite don't see most of us as human. Go ahead.
Well, first time I saw it, I just thought it was a mistake. Then they said man or other animals a second time in the same definition. Then I read the federal code at Title 21, Section 321, subparagraph G, subsection G, subparagraph 1. And it says, again, virtual identical definition of drugs. Drugs are for man or other animals. What we did, I realized that they are treating it, the presumption for these definitions is that we are animals. And I also understand enough about the Bible where I know that at Genesis chapter 1, sections 26 through 28, it says, on the 6th day, God created man in his image and gave man dominion over the animals, which means that as a Jew or a Christian, and probably even as a Muslim, I assume the Muslim faith has a similar notion about Genesis, although I don't know that to be true. But as a Jew or a Christian, you can't call me an animal without violating my freedom of religion. I drafted a defense in this case that was based on freedom of religion. And I said, you can't call me an animal. You can't charge me $25,000 a day based on the presumption that I'm an animal because I am a man made in God's image and I'm endowed. And then I went on with the Declaration.
And you won. And I want you to continue with this and then get into what's happening currently. But you're telling us who the globalists are. They see us as animals. But what you've hit on here is so central. Even if someone's an agnostic or an atheist,
yes,
and they don't believe in God, they need to say, I believe in a higher power, because if you don't, there's always a higher power. Then some king rat, some strong man, some gang, some guy named Humongous with a motorcycle gang is going to put himself above you. That's what Thomas Jefferson was saying. We're saying, buddy, we got freedom in the universe.
And if you don't get it from God, you don't get it.
That's right.
All right? That's the point to this. If you're willing to be an animal, you can be treated just like a chicken.
That's right. It's their rules. The globalists understand this. They believe they've been given the power of God to be a human, not an animal. We've got, again, this is all law.
Well, I agree, and it's not just all law. It goes back thousands of years. This is part of spiritual warfare. This isn't a new situation. It's one of the essential acts of genocide is dehumanization. You can go to genocidewatch.org, and they've got a document up there.
No, they always do it. You are stating a giant, naked truth, a trillion-pound elephant in the living room, and half the audience, even though they're smart, is saying, what are they talking about? Let's go back to this point, Alfred. Now, a lot of times, we stay on this topic, but I want to get into some other areas as well, straight ahead. And by the way, I've got to get you on a routine basis. You're just amazing. We'll be right back. You don't need me to tell you that humanity is in a deep crisis. Everyone can feel it. We know a tectonic struggle is now taking place between the forces of freedom and those who love darkness, bondage, and enslavement. Yes, my friends, evil is rising. But take heart, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Recently, New World Order operative Hillary Clinton admitted they're losing the info war.
We are in an information war, and we are losing that war.
The globalists are scared. They've overreached. The future of the info war is in your hands. Join PrisonPlanet.tv. Download the thousands of special video reports, ebooks, and more, and get them out to everyone you know. Continue to spread the word about the broadcast on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and every other globalist propaganda platform. We are going to use their system against them. The info war now goes into high gear. Sir, please continue breaking down your research of the globalist and the world they want to build. We understand they think they're gods and we're animals, and they engineer us like animals and lie to us, and it's people that are part of the establishment, even at lower level, get off on deceiving, get off on dumbing down, get off on weakening. They want to get rid of the family. So where are these people going from your research? What are they wanting to build?
I don't know what they want to build exactly. They want power. They are lovers of money. They want power, and they are definitely ungodly. I mean, the whole concept of sovereignty flows from the idea that you receive your rights from God. If you're an animal, you have no more rights than a chicken, a pig, or a goat, and the only thing to distinguish you from those other animals is you have firearms. They take your firearms away, and they can handle you just like the rest of the livestock. It's the only thing from their perspective that makes you dangerous. But our Declaration of Independence started out and said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. This is the foundation for individual sovereignty. In the past, the only sovereigns prior to the Declaration were the King of England, the King of Spain, the King of Italy, and so on. Those people were kings because they had the divine right of kings. They received their rights directly from God, and all else were subjects because they did not get their rights directly from God.
Now, Alfred, I called this the giant trillion-pound elephant in the room. There it is again. In all cultures, everyone had always been seen as animals, as the subcaste, as the garbage. In fact, in many ancient cultures, the elites would put animals up above humans to teach us we're trash. That's what the modern environmental movement is, not to help the environment, but to teach us to self-loathe, to not believe that we're special and made in the image of the Creator. It's all meant to make us think bad about ourselves, and now it's so alien to people to realize the globalist view when just a few hundred years ago there were no systems where people weren't basically seen as chattel.
Well, the one exception, again, In England, for example, the king and the king alone was sovereign because he had the divine right of kings. When our founders came across and they said, no, wait, in the Declaration of Independence, they said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, they meant all men, including kings, were created equal, and all were endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights. That elevated all men to the status of sovereigns. Under those circumstances, government became our servant rather than our master. It's the reason the Supreme Court ruled in Chisholm versus Georgia, 1793. They said this was the people of the United States of America are sovereigns, plural, without subjects. It's based on this principle in the Declaration of Independence that we all effective. The unalienable rights, in my opinion, are equivalent to the divine right of kings. We get them from God.
No, they are. That's why all the legalese and bureaucracy that's outside of true common law is you are now subject to seizure. You are now a licensure. You're being licensed. As a slave, you're being given, and black slaves had to wear these, a tag around your neck with a note saying where you're allowed to go. And here are these cops thinking it's a normal system, thinking it's constitutional, thinking it's to keep everybody safe. And we're all running around with our little papers. I mean, even just 60 years ago, we knew Germany was bad. You had to have papers to travel internally in the country. Now we just accept it. And in New York City, I wanted to raise this, they arrested 9/11 truthers, not at Ground Zero, but basically anywhere in Lower Manhattan, and would arrest you if you spoke on a street corner and handed out literature. But others who were handing out pro-government, they were allowed. I mean, we're getting very far down this road.
Yeah, I know. I agree. And for what it's, we've had people, I've been contacted by one man from Australia, another guy from England who's heard me talk about man or other animals relative to the drug laws. And they've researched the English drug laws and they researched the Australian drug laws. And they tell me that you find the same presumption there. The people are animals. The reason this is so important is the presumption that the people are animals laid the foundation, lies at the heart of the drug war, the war on drugs that was started by President Nixon back in 1971. It's based on the presumption that we're all just livestock. And the war on drugs laid the foundation for much of the modern police state. And the police state laid the foundation for the prison industrial complex. I've heard that 70% of people in federal pens are there on drug-related crimes. All of this is perched on a little definition of drugs that presumes the people to be animals in violation of our freedom of religion.
And you've beat them in federal court. Let's talk more about that case, get into some other news and phone calls with Afred Adask right here on GCNlive.com. I'm Alex Jones. Stay with us. We are back live here, my friends, and I do want to get to Micah and Ken and Michael and many others that are patiently holding here in just a few minutes. I should add that we are seeing something really historical happening right now. Watching CNBC, listening to Bloomberg on radio, reading all their statements, we knew this was coming more than a decade ago, but we're now seeing it. And after bailout in Europe, they're not bailouts. They're government taxes paid directly to the big six private megabanks. And each time it happens, the countries get more in debt because the countries go in debt to give the money to the private central banks. That's why they don't just monetize and give it to the banks to get the money off their books that then causes inflation. But that's still a better thing than publicly raising taxes, cutting infrastructure to implode the economy, and then paying that to the banks, who are the ones you're bailing out. It's so simple, it's complex. They're the ones that engage in the fraud. You're bailing them out, but then you owe them money because you bailed them out, because they're the people that authorize your government, the euro, the dollar, you name it, to issue the currency. Now, they're openly saying the problem is the Germans won't vote for this and have had 2 elections since the bailout started, and they're about to get rid of Merkel. And I've heard them on CNBC and Bloomberg say it's terrible that there's democracy. Of course, really, it should be a republic, but the point is they're saying it's too bad the people can vote because this is going to cause a world depression. Now, they've already maneuvered us to a world depression. But they then destroy confidence by saying the markets are down because the people aren't bailing us out. But the new third bailout isn't a bailout. It's transferring what's left of national sovereignty through the euro to this private banking system. So here is world government run by private corporations that have created the crisis, openly holding Europe hostage while they have their banker chiefs go out and destroy confidence. Same thing that was done to get the Super Congress passed here. Same thing that was done with the bailout. Alfred, watching this, what's your view on how things are going for the New World Order?
Well, I think they're desperate. I think things are, I can't remember the name. One of the former secretaries of state criticized Bush when Bush first botched the invasion of Iraq and got bogged down there. I can't think of the man's name, but he says, you've set the New World Order back 30 years. All right. I think these people know they're on the ropes. You quoted earlier where Hillary Clinton said they're losing the information war. All right, the information battle. I think they know they're on the ropes and they are desperate and they are pushing as hard as they can to make this happen before it all blows up in their face. We're in a situation where it's like two railroad trains coming for the same crossing, and both of them are trying to go as fast as they can to get there first and get through without getting hit. But we'll see. We're coming for we are approaching a great collision, and we'll see how it unfolds.
We're going to see staged terror attacks, new wars, bioweapon releases.
Yeah.
We are entering a time of some of the greatest tumult and upheaval this earth has ever seen in human activities. And by the way, that was Brent Scrowcroft, former National Security Advisor to George Herbert Walker Bush, that did say George W. Bush had set the New World Order back 30 years. And so it's like NASCAR. They were three laps ahead of us. But since the globalists have gotten caught lying about WMD, staging 9/11, and other events, they are now only about a car length ahead of us. Their tires are bald. They're almost out of gas. And there's smoke coming out from under the hood.
Yeah, I understand. We are at the little man behind the curtain moment. All right. People are beginning to understand that this thing has been run by a relatively small group of people who can be had if we want to stand up and do something about it. I listened to one of your ads earlier before I got on, at least, and you were talking about a food crisis. Let me ask you, do you know who the first economist was?
There have been quite a few, but tell me.
Joseph in the Bible goes all the way back to 1800 BC, and you can read about it in Genesis chapter 47. When I was a kid, and this relates to the food crisis. This is a little bit long, but this relates to the food crisis. And what Genesis 47 talks about Joseph in the Old Testament, where
wasn't he telling the Egyptians the whole story about, he had the dream and you've got to have 7 years of grain put back because of the famine?
Yep, that's it. But the way I was taught it when I went to Bible school as a kid is Joseph, he knew there were going to be 7 good years and then there were going to be 7 bad years, and therefore he saved up the extra grain in the 7 good years so the people would have grain in the 7 bad years. That's not true. Here's what happened, and you can read this in Genesis chapter 47, and it says, and there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was sore, and it was very sore, and that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan faded by reason of famine. In other words, we're into the 7 bad years. Now, Joseph had stored up grain in the 7 good years, but when the 7 bad years came, here it says Genesis 47:14, and Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan for the grain which they brought, and Joseph brought the money into the Pharaoh's house. And when the money was all spent in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came unto Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in thy presence? For our money faileth. What they didn't understand, Joseph was selling grain. He wasn't giving it to the people. He knew there was going to be a shortage. He cornered the market on grain because he knew famine was coming. Then he sold the grain in the first year for money. He took all the money, he gave it to the Pharaoh. It moved into the Pharaoh's house. They took it out of circulation. And without money, the people could not work effectively to work their way through the famine. This reminds me of 1933. Our government took the gold out of circulation. And in 1968, they took the silver out of circulation. And in that regard, they are paralleling what Joseph did 3,800 years ago. And it goes on the second year. Joseph, they come back and they say, we need some more food. Joseph said, give your cattle, and I will give you for your cattle, give you grain if the money failed. He knows it failed because he took it out of circulation. The people sold all their cattle in the second year to Joseph. In the third year, they came back. They were hungry again. They needed more. And this time, they sold themselves into slavery and all of their land to Pharaoh.
And that's exactly what the bankers have done. We're entering the third year, and every time we get in trouble, they bail us out by us bailing them out. We give them our money. I mean, this is all scientifically done. And I tell you, Alfred, I learned very few new things from guests, and I'm learning stuff from you today.
Well, I'll tell you, that Genesis 47 is just astonishing. You read it, and you read it closely, you realize, my God, they're explaining how economics works, and they understood it 3,800 years ago. I don't think it's an accident that a modern economics text is almost impossible to understand. I don't think they want you to understand it. Joseph understood economics. You take the money out of circulation, corner the market on food, and you can put the people into bondage.
And let me stop you there. They've taken the money and put it in Pharaoh's house. For 3 years now, they've taken $16 trillion domestically, the tens of trillions that went overseas. Bloomberg says it's more like $28 trillion. Other economists I have on say it's more like 18. Whatever. They've taken the tens of trillions of our money that we've got to pay taxes on and interest. They've given it to the mega families. But people are worried about inflation. It hasn't been that bad yet because they hoarded it and did not loan it back. So they put us under great bondage of debts that's fraudulent. They put us under taxes, under austerity, which they know kills the economy. All these other independent economists are saying, why are you doing this? This is killing the economy. They further put us under the famine while they fully control all the money, holding it in Pharaoh's house, and then come back and say, give us absolute power in a private corporate world government, and we'll fix it. And the people give them even more power, and it doesn't, because at the end of the day, they don't want people here in Egypt. The globalists want us dead. They want the entire land. They don't want our oxen. They don't want our children. They don't want our women. They want us all wiped out and dead. New World Order, fait complete, total domination, endgame.